Welcome to Tap That, the podcast for founders and people who build companies around tech. Brought to you by Tappable.
Hello, Andy.
Good morning, Sam.
Good morning. Is it still morning? Today I want to talk about analysis. We know it as analysis. Clients know it as scoping, discovery, that sort of thing. So your area of expertise,
Love
correct?
this stuff. Yes.
Good. So when we start phases of work, we often tell clients, let's do some analysis first. And often it's hard for people to get their head round. So I'm going to sort of play the role of a customer and ask some questions that hopefully you can answer without any preparation at all.
We'd hope so.
Excellent. So but before we do that, just tell me, what are your skills? What do you need to do analysis and what's your background in this stuff?
Oh, lovely. Okay, great. So general scoping, systems designs, requirements analysis, it's a well-known science as well as an art. Personally, I did my first requirements training course about 25 years ago now. It was the first thing I asked to be put on.
Nice. Before the internet.
Before the internet. Yes, back in WW2. It's as I say, it's a science and an art. There's tools and technical tools. There's modelling approaches you can go through. I always say this to clients that a picture paints 1,000 words, to make them realise that you could just write lots and lots of words to describe what you want, but really diagrams and process flows, they're all forms of pictures. For us, when we produce mock-ups of screens, they sell the most story or actual screen designs that we can show exactly what every page of your app looks like. These are things that are really going to get anyone who's looking at them thinking about what the solution is and going, oh, actually, maybe it should do this.
Nice.
It's really just about years in the trenches, right? Knowing what to look for, knowing what questions to ask, to say, oh, you said you want this, but actually, often these are problems that happen if you've asked for, oh, I just want something to scan a QR code, and we'll say, okay, well, these things can go wrong with QR codes. What's your backup plan?
Yeah.
Often a lot of the analysis is focused on edge cases.
Yeah.
And what edge cases, when things can go wrong, there is nothing that competes with experience for knowing what questions to ask and saying, oh, that will be a pitfall before you've even asked anyone any details. I hear one sentence, these are the 3 pitfalls you want to try and avoid.
Great. So analysis is, and thank you, analysis is really taking the client's description of a happy path of a product and filling in all the blanks around what could go wrong, what you need to think about, and all of that stuff. Is that an oversimplified assessment?
I tend to think I'm an edge case junkie, so I often just fill in all the unhappy parts. But there's a more positive, important spin to it as well. It's, you said you wanted these things, but rather than just giving us a list of things you want, just tell us the motivation behind why you wanted them, because we also have experience to say, if you're doing that, why don't you do this as well? If your whole point is to make more money, if you add this sort of advertising module, you can make even more money. That's just a crude point. Or if your whole point of your app is to save you time, well, have you thought about this technology? Because it might save you even more time.
Right, okay. Yeah, great. So let's say I wanted to build a health and safety reporting tool, and I've got 100 factories, but this is a tool that I want my staff to download on their phone. So I can say to you, hey Andy, hey Tappable, here's the 10 list bullet point things that I want this app to do. You then say, we need to do some analysis. Well, I've told you what I want, and that's it. So why can't you tell me how long this thing will take to build?
Well, likely those 10 things will be a list of functionality that you believe or know that you want. Just a list of things I want. Health and safety reporting app, like some screens for data entry, or taking photos of existing things or something along those lines. And people will often go, oh, I guess we need a login and we need to record who did it, and they'll just bullet point these things out to us. Great, you can get a ballpark for that thing because of experience. You can get a ballpark, but very quickly in an analysis phase, you'll start. Let's talk about the happy path first. What's your motivation for this thing? Is it because there is no process at the moment, or do you have which is more likely a paper-based process that you want to replace. If you're replacing a paper-based process, you've probably identified the one thing that people moan about the most, which is a part of a really long process.
Yeah.
So yes, we could just do what you've asked for, and say, thank you very much, it'll cost this much, Mr. Customer. But then what if it's not quite right? What if the downstream processes don't work properly for you? What if we haven't considered all of the edge cases that might go wrong in those downstream processes, and actually you try and roll this thing out and it causes more of a problem for you? We could do that. And then you'd come back and say, it's not quite working for us. And either one or two discussions will happen. Either, can you now do this extra thing which will cost us more money to fix what we could have known at the start?
Yep.
Or you say, well, that's not what I expected.
Yeah.
Old Tappable. Okay. So maybe we should do something. Maybe you should fix it for us because we should have got it right in the first place.
Yes. Okay. So I've given you my 10 listed bullet points of, I want my staff to download an app. I want them to, when there's a problem in my factory, record it, fill in some information, take a photo, hit a button. Because then, we'll get those reports. And you said that's not quite enough. We need a bit more, kind of existing. Great. So now I've gone and written a 2-page of what I think is a deeper description. Well, they log into the app. They put their username or their email and their password in. They then take a photo and they submit it. And then we can log in and download those reports. Is that enough?
Again, things are all there's always ways to do top-down estimations. There's enough to come up with some ballpark things, but let's talk about non-functional requirements, which are the things other than the features, for a moment. Does everybody have a company-provided device? So they're all iPhones, so you just want an iPhone app because that's just one platform, one environment that's slightly easier to build. Or people bringing their own devices, so we now need to go on Android and iOS. That's going to change notably all of the costs along the way and the design process. Do you have an existing back-end system that you were thinking that we are integrating with? Or do you need us to build one?
Yes, I do. You can just put the reports in there, right?
We've just
How long would that take?
Put the reports in there.
Yeah, just put the reports in there.
Excellent. So what we'd need to do is just have a look at the specification of this thing, because do we have existing APIs that we can send them to, or do they need to be emailed to an inbox and we need to write a component which will take them from there and then do something else with them? Your existing system, is it going to take all of the data that you currently have in this format that you're planning to do from the phone, or do we need to do some tweaking to that environment as well? There's the biggest thing that I would be mostly concerned about on your behalf is, let's just check this change of your data entry point. What may change and cause problems for your downstream processes? Because at the very least, if you just want what you've asked for, let's make sure nothing else changes to the detriment and actually makes things worse. Yeah. And actually, as part of that analysis, I will bet my bottom dollar that we can find another part of the process further down that for barely any extra effort, we can really streamline for you.
Right. So the analysis is not only about figuring out exactly what I need. The unearthing of that actually might show some indicators of there's other things we could do at the same time.
If you are interested in that, yes. And why wouldn't you? Because we even if it's just further analysis into the list of 10 requirements that you've given to us, it's not just incredibly worthwhile, it's almost critical. There's a great chart that I often roll out to people from the National Institute of Standards in Technology that shows that in an analysis phase, if it costs you like 1 day to fix a bug, something that you've found, and you can find bugs in an analysis phase before a line of code is written. You just write down, do your process flows, I think it's going to work like this, show it to some people who are experts, both in building technology and the people that will use it, and they will find issues. Oh no, that actually it can't work like that. I've just realised because we've got that one product, that one customer which needs this extra field and has this slightly different process. So it won't work for that one product. So we actually need to deal with that edge case in our app, or know that we've got to retain an old way of working.
And that's
dual
not
running.
something that I would have thought about
Right.
unless we're in the detail.
Unless we're in the detail. But if we imagine, so those things can be debugged before any line of code is written. If it takes a day to debug and fix it in the analysis phase, then the NIST report shows that it will take 5 days. It will be 5 times the effort while we are building the code to fix it. If we are in the integration test phase, which tends to be still with the developers, 10 times the cost. If it's in the UAT phase where the customer's signing it off, 15 times the cost. And if it's in production, 30 times the cost. If we've rolled it out and then we find out, oh God, we didn't think about product X. So now this whole, well, that's going to be 30 times the cost to fix it. What normally happens in these situations, if we don't do the analysis, is that 15 times. Because so I've told you what I want, go ahead and build it. So we'll build it and then we'll show you it, and then you give it to people to use, and then they will find the issues. So if we haven't found them in analysis phase, it's most often found in that UAT phase, 15 times the cost for not finding it earlier. Who carries that cost, right?
Yeah.
So it's always going to be the customer, one way or another. Either you've asked, say, I want to do the analysis, can you just give me men to build it?
Yeah.
And then we'll do a time and materials arrangement. So that means it literally will be 15 times the hours you're paying for.
Yeah.
Or if, as is common, startup, we'd like a fixed price, please. We have to make sure that the analysis is strong enough that we have tried to find those bugs early.
Yeah.
Or the cost has to accommodate the certainty that we will have a number of issues found in UAT at 15 times the cost.
Okay. So debug. I mean, to help me as a customer understand and put it into simpler words, that debugging to me is something we do in code, but actually what we're saying is debugging analysis is really finding those edge cases, finding those things, those nuances that we didn't think about, and just the very art of thinking about them in advance and then planning the technology is a far cheaper way than building it without spending the time looking for those things, because once we have a system built, it's not just words on documents and diagrams we're changing, we're rebuilding code and all the knock-on effects from that.
And who knows how much of a monumental change it will be.
Right. So that the value in doing the, like, that should be the only selling point, should it not? Like that's
cost reduction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything comes down to that. You know, you always say cost and time. So cost reduction and reduction of the time it takes to get your product out there because of the lack of 15 times issues that come on in a later phase.
Cool. So I understand the benefits now. But what's the process look like? You know, analysis, it sounds very complicated, detailed, time heavy. Like, what's the process? How do you actually do it?
So we tend to want to start, if possible, with just initial face-to-face meeting. I always say, give me your elevator pitch of the product, because so much about the analysis is working out the motivation for why you want this thing in the first place. So we can use our experience to help you say, okay, so you assume you want these features, maybe you need to consider these other things as well. So getting an elevator pitch about why is this thing being built face to face in a room, really important. Then we can just start diving in and saying, okay, great, let's talk about your assumed list of features.
And we're still this is still in a workshop, discussion.
Absolutely,
okay.
Initial scoping discussion. Sometimes the just the dialogue is so important to get people thinking about it. It will literally be just a dialogue, right? Depending how advanced the thought processes are in the client's mind, we may start getting on a shared whiteboard and sort of getting some diagrams out to start bringing some things to life as well. Okay, so what we're saying is we need screens to do this, a simple login, and then they will submit this form with these 5 fields on it. Will that work for you, Mr. Customer? And even just seeing those screens in an environment slightly different to the environment they've been in before, often they'll go, oh, actually, there's product X we haven't considered. So even in those early workshops, we start teasing out, you think you want this, but maybe you also want these other things, or perhaps you want that instead. So that initial workshop might be verbal, or it might be, let's start diagramming some things out. Let's try and list some things, but diagrams if we can. just initial scoping so that
Yeah.
we get a really good understanding of your product, and we can do that first level of analysis understanding. We tend to then say, great, let us digest it. I always try and take it away and produce some mock-ups using our mock-up tool that we love, Whimsical.
And mock-ups are screen mock-ups?
Mock-ups are absolutely screens, because not only does that help people really visualize the product, there's a lot of back-end processes and things that we can sort out later, and we will have some questions around. Not only does it help the customer visualize the product and able to answer the questions and validate their own assumptions with our support, it also gets us focusing on the user experience, which is the most important thing anyway. So we've had people come to us with user experience docs before, user journeys, and these user experience docs or user journeys are talking about the database structure. Like, please forget about that and let us scope out how this product needs to be used initially, and all of the other stuff falls out from there. So in the downtime after the first initial workshop, we'll try and get some mock-ups, getting people, these are the screens, that's what they'll look like, does this all work for you? And then we all get back together. I'm more comfortable the second time we meet being virtual, because then we can share a screen with Whimsical and start making notes on it, and literally we'll be moving components around our mock-up tool as we are saying, does this work for you? And I have never ever had a client who thinks they know everything that they want, who doesn't then have some monumental changes while we are going through those mock-ups together in workshop number 2.
Right.
And then we just repeat a series of these similar workshops and downtime to, okay, let us take what we've discussed and come up with some other things for you. Make sure we've got it all streamlined. At the end of an analysis phase, as a minimum, we will have a series of mock-ups that everybody agrees, yes, that's how we want the app to work. And then a list of words that at least add some more specific details to those mock-ups. But because they're words, they're harder to digest in isolation, but they're an important accompaniment because they're giving the detail. And those words, list of words, through the lens of the mock-ups, is often enough for us to talk to some developers and say, right, these are exactly what we want. These screens, these list of requirements, let's go and have it's still always guesswork, but now let's come up with an estimate of how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost.
Okay, so still in this analysis phase, the scoping analysis at the beginning, you avoid the kind of technical, it's all of the what we want to do's rather than the how we're going to do things. So it's less about actually figuring out, right, so that, the technical architecture for doing things versus the description of actually what we want to do, because we can figure that stuff out later.
That's more important. However, to get the estimates right, somebody at least needs to there's wildly different costs for doing things in a different way. We're doing a product where we're just using a Google product called Firebase as a back end, and it costs you nothing to host at small volumes. It comes up with some APIs for free, and that can host you a little database where your app can call it. And it scales reasonably well, and it's going to be cheap, but it's not going to scale gloriously well, and it's not going to have all the flexibility of things that you can if you have it on a public cloud service like Azure or Amazon Web Services. So, and if it's on Amazon Web Services, we can do a cheaper, what they call a monolith application, which is it's going to do a fair amount of deal with a fair amount of traffic. But if you really need to go multinational on a mass scale, then you probably want these things as what they call microservices that can scale independently and really serve everyone at absolute milliseconds. These have a completely different cost. Most customers don't care about the detail.
Well, we're going to trust you to do it, right? This is exactly I'm signing up to what a description of and visuals of what I want you to do. Almost don't care about how you do it. But if I am, of course, then you can
we can pull them out. These are parts of the non-functional requirements. Functional being how it works. Non-functional requirements, or NFRs. Sometimes we have to explain what they are to people, but it's things along these lines that are going to affect lots of words ending in ility, right? It's like the usability, maintainability, extensibility. Like security is often another thing that throws in there. How crazily secure do you need this thing to be? All of these things add some cost, so they need to be factored in. Like performance, how well does it need to perform? how well do they need to perform across the globe, in what localities, they will affect the quote. So questions need to be asked. Harder for clients to answer them at times, so they just need guidance from us. So another reason, we need to understand your product and your user base.
Yep.
Oh, you need 1,000 users or 10,000 users in a small geography. Firebase will probably be okay, and it's cheaper for these reasons, but this is your trade-off, Mr. Customer.
Yep.
It's just what we recommend.
Okay, cool. Good. Well, I have a good understanding of what the analysis is now, and my health and safety report is actually pretty complicated with the number of components, because now we're doing all this edge case mapping and thinking, and functional, non-functional requirements. Thank you. I now have an understanding of those things. And the takeaway, so at the end of this scoping analysis, I have a set of a set of diagrams, mock-ups we call them, and some list of words, in Excel format.
This is what Excel, the world's most transferable tool, right? So we don't do a sort of requirements management tool lock-in for anyone else. We could, and then we could export them to people. But what we prefer to do, certainly in the early phase, is exactly that: a list of requirements with only the right level of detail, not killing ourselves with detail at this point. Analysis paralysis is a known concept. Don't spend forever, because we want to just start building this thing once we know enough. But at least in Excel, we can share that document with clients. Like, write your notes directly in there, take it, deal with it, understand it as that tool as easily as you understand anything else you've ever worked with, because we all know Excel.
Cool.
We keep them there at that point. Yes, a list of a list of requirements in Excel. Yes, a list of mock-ups and process flows for some more complicated things for you to take away and use as you wish. There are certain analysis phases where we bolt into that some beautiful coloured in designs, because they answer more questions, but we should answer the questions on the mock-ups first, because again, cheaper to make changes. So at the end of the analysis phase, take away all of these diagrams and these requirements. They should be enough for anyone to quote. Take them away.
Yeah.
Hopefully you've enjoyed working with Tappable. You trust us enough to say, great, Tappable, can you build it now? Of course we can build it now. But you can also take it away to other people. There's no lock-in for us, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, always. Cool. All right. Thank you. I have a good understanding of analysis. I think the key takeaway is it's cheaper spending that money up front than debugging later. I think that's the real key, debugging an actual code versus debugging and some diagrams. Super valuable.
Most commonly 15 times cheaper, because that UAT is the time when most of these things come out, if client and developers haven't come together to answer those questions in the analysis phase.
Great. Awesome. Well, we've got some analysis to do. Let's go.
Should we get cracking?
Let's go and do some. Thank you, Mr. Sweet-Roe.